just going to use Zoom?
Please. One thing at a time.
Your place looks exactly how I would have imagined it if I was thinking that you were painting it yourself and doing your radio show about how much you love music. You've always been somebody in this world who I don't know where and how the artistry of it speaks to you. I don't know how it is you got your beginnings. We'll talk about the book in a second, but you really are an artist, right?
It's all in the book, man. It's all in the book. Yeah, you know, I mean, this is my kitchen. That's a Ringo art.
It's a cool ass kitchen, Stevie.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Anyway, are we good?
Yes, we're ready to go.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to keep some of that organic free flowing
we're going to keep that in and just, organic banter as we sell your book,
Humanizing, textualizing.
Unrequited Infatuations, a memoir. It's available now. It comes out September 28th, but it is something that you can get very soon. So you wrote it. Why, Stevie? And thank you for making the time for us. Why did you decide that you needed to or wanted to do this?
Nothing better to do. I mean, what are you going to do during a quarantine, right?
Watch Tiger King. Oh,
but seriously, I gave it a shot like 10 years ago, and I just couldn't get it together. And these last 3 years before the quarantine, 17, 18, 19, ended up being the 3 of the most productive years of my entire life. I did like six new album packages in 3 years. And I wasn't even expecting to come back into the music business at all. But through some bizarre circumstance, I got back into it and really reconnected with my life's work for the first time in 30 years, believe it or not. And it kind of provided a little bit of closure, these last couple of years. I got new managers. I never had managers in my whole life, as you can read in the book. That's where half my problems come from. And the new managers suggested, doing the book, and they even had an idea for the beginning and the end of the book. So it kind of had a nice storyline to it. And so I figured, if I don't do it now, I'm probably never going to do it. So, I wanted to do it, and I wanted it to be more than just my narrative. My story is the least interesting part of the story of the book. I think, I wanted to talk about some history, because I kind of lived most of it, other than the first decade of rock and roll. I kind of lived it, and plus I've been involved with a lot of different crafts through the years, so I wanted to provide a little insight into some of those crafts and things like that. So I wanted the book to be useful and to be a bit of a page turner, be more of like a detective novel where you don't know what's coming next, because the first half of the book is my music side, obviously, but it doesn't stay there. It goes, once I leave the E Street Band, it really, the adventure kind of opens up, and you don't really know where it's going to go, because I didn't know where my life was going to go. So I want it to be more than just a music book for music people, and want it to be something bigger than that.
We'll get to your activism in a second. You helped with the freeing of Mandela, and then told him to get his ass downstairs and speak to a bunch of people who had raised a lot of money to help Mandela. We'll get to some of your activism in a second, but you said 30 years without being able to reconnect for real with your music. That's a bit confusing. I mean, you've been touring, you've been making music, and you love music in a way that you host your own radio show. So what does that mean?
Well, I hadn't written anything for myself really since '89, and basically was out of the business in the '90s, which was a strange period for me. And then David Chase called, and I started acting. So Sopranos was 10 years, Lilyhammer was 4 years, and then Bruce put the band back together. And before you know it, I mean, I did the music for Lilyhammer, which we finally got released this past year. But that was more of a score, you know, more. It wasn't really an album for myself. It wasn't a personal album, which is a whole different thing. So I didn't. I just didn't have anything really I needed to say. I said everything I wanted to say in the '80s, and then suddenly I got back into it. And Soulfire was a surprise. I just decided I had this band together that was really great because this guy asked me to play a blues festival just out of the blue. You know, come play my blues festival. Okay, you know. Threw a band together, and it was so great, so much fun that we decided to do Soulfire, which was an album of songs I've written for other people. And then we ended up touring out of the blue. And then during that tour, the Summer of Sorcery album started to come to me, and I wrote a whole new album. So it was all very, very unplanned, like most of my life, to be honest. And it was nice. It was nice to reconnect with the musical side of me, but I hadn't planned on it. You know.
How did you and Bruce come together, Stevie?
Well, we each had bands at a time when there wasn't that many bands out and about. In other words, once the British invasion hit, once the Beatles came, 1964, we went from a country there was no bands to basically everybody had a band, but they mostly stayed in their garage, mercifully. But about a dozen of us got out of the garage and had, like a local circuit. We're a very lucky generation, the luckiest generation in the world. I mean, we had lots of places to play, still in high school, And so he had a band, the Castiles. I had a band called The Source. And you were friendly, if you were in a band, you were friendly. In those days, if you had long hair, you were friendly, because that was already freaky. And like I always say, if you had long hair and were in a band, you were best friends.
You got kicked out of high school, right? Your hair got you kicked out of high school, right?
Yeah. It was a funny time. There was very, very conservative times back then. You couldn't wear jeans. Couldn't have long hair. Yeah, I think I got kicked out of school, and then I got kicked out of the house, or vice versa. I'm not sure which came first, but I got kicked out of both my house and my school for a while. Yeah.
And then you become friends with Bruce and you go on this adventure. But at the start of it, if I'd said, what do your wildest dreams look like from right here? You've exceeded them, have you not?
Well, yeah, just making it in rock and roll was almost impossible then. Now it is impossible. But back then it was still difficult, But there was a reward at the end of the journey. If you could survive the journey, there was a reward back then, which no longer exists. But we we're kind of late. We were kind of getting up in years. We really didn't break through till our fifth album. Which you're never going to get 5 albums these days. So we didn't actually have a success until we were 30 years old, which was old for rock and roll. And we kind of just got through the door. Only a few bands came in after us, to that level of arenas going to stadiums. U2 most notably. But not too many. Not too many got in after us. We were one of the last ones in, and yes, very lucky. Finally broke through on the river, and then I produced most of Born in the USA, and left before it came out, and that was an even bigger success. So we were one of the lucky ones.
When you say impossible now, you can't even exist now, right? The rock star, the idea of birthing a rock star band is damn near impossible. It's pop stars and pop culture, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we're back to being a cult, which is where we started, in the 50s. And maybe that's where we belong, to be honest, But I think the rock era will be an anomaly, an anomaly of history. It was just a blip on the radar screen. Probably 30 years, from around 65 to 94. I clock it from like a Rolling Stone to Kurt Cobain's death. And then the rock era really ended, and we went back to being a pop era. And I think we'll stay there forever now. So it's just, the industry, as far as the industry is concerned, and radio, I mean, rock is certainly over, but live, we're still the biggest thing, thankfully. We still, most of the big acts live, are still rock, Occasionally you'll get like a hip hop festival or something, some 3 or 4 or 5 acts together. But most of the big stadium acts are still rock. We still, it's us and the Stones and U2 and Paul McCartney and.
Well, you can still do it. You can still do it. It's not
whenever they want. They can do
whenever you want.
Yeah.
You guys can fill a stadium, correct?
Yeah. No, and that's what I mean. It's wonderful because that's not going to change. Unfortunately, we're not being replaced. Is the bottom line.
But the fact that you can't exist the way you did when you first got started, does that anger you at all?
Say that again.
The fact that you can't exist in 2021, you could sell out a stadium, but the rock star, does not exist anymore.
He's saying if it bothers you, does it bother you? You're speaking matter of factly. This is what's happened. This has been the evolution of music, and he's asking you if it bothers you at all to see that evolution, that the rock star has been replaced by pop.
Well, the celebrity, the big part of it doesn't matter. I don't care about that. What I spent the last 20 years doing with my radio show, my radio format, my record company, even my foundation, has been trying to strengthen the rock and roll existence. It's like an endangered species. I'm just trying to shore it up so it can exist even as a cult, and eventually, hopefully, get back to where people can make a living doing it. That's the problem right now. Is it's all or nothing. Either you're playing stadiums or you're playing on the weekend and keeping another job. It would be nice to have something in the middle where people can make a living playing rock and roll again, and keep that cult a healthy cult. That's the only thing that bothers me is right now. It's very difficult for new bands, and we deal with a lot of new bands, and it's tough for them, Luckily, we have our radio format in over 100 countries, and we play these new bands. We've introduced over 1,000 new bands in 20 years, and so we keep the new bands, at least having a little bit of hope. We give them airplay, and sometimes people will pick up on them and book them for festivals. The festivals have kind of replaced the old club and theater scene a little bit. A lot of the clubs have closed. A lot of the theaters have closed. The infrastructure is not there. We have to rebuild the infrastructure to try and maintain what rock and roll was and what could be. But it still exists. Like I say, 1,000 bands have decided to be rock and roll bands in the last 20 years with no logical reason, no reward whatsoever. So people are still doing it out of pure passion. That makes you want to support them even more.
Stugatz, the book names names. He's out there. He's not afraid of anybody. Frank Zappa was an asshole to him. He wanted Frank Zappa to work on We Are the World. How many other assholes did you call out, dude? How many by name were arrogant? You didn't have any time for that arrogance.
Yeah, Sun City, not We Are the World, Sun City. But yeah, I left most of them out, to be honest, because I didn't want the book to be too negative, really, and it's easy to vent, you know what I mean? It's easy to use an autobiography to vent. I never had a manager, so, I'm dealing directly with a lot of assholes, okay? And when I went back and was reliving all of these, reliving my life, you get reminded of people that you kind of erased in your mind. But I only left a few of them in.
Name one, Stevie. Name one that you left out. Just one. Just one that you left out.
just to sell the book. How about at the end, if you've enjoyed the interview, you can sit on it for a second. It'll be a little reward. If we can ask you good questions the rest of the way and properly promote the book, at the end, you promise to, if you're satisfied, to name one of the assholes who's not in the book, Unrequited Infatuations. Are you willing to do that over the next 15 minutes? We're gambling. You will have fun the next 15 minutes, or we get an asshole named. Fair enough?
We'll see. We'll see. I'm not making any promises.
Okay.
Because, I left them out for a reason. And, there's plenty in there to keep you happy if that's all you're looking for.
It really is unfair. You've written a book about a very interesting life, and we're just like, we're totally TMZing it. Name the assholes. And you helped free Mandela. Name the assholes. But anyways, let's go ahead and ask him about the craft. How often, Stevie, have you found yourself, and what are the instances, sort of awed by the company that you're keeping in music, the royalty, where even no matter what your ego is, you're like, I can't believe that I can be in the presence of these people making this thing that I love?
Well, you got to compartmentalize when it comes to, meeting your heroes and meeting your, the people you grew up loving. I mean, most notably, the guy who plays the biggest role in the book is Paul McCartney. And, you can't think of him as, the very first album I bought was a Beatles album, So I'm 13 years old, trying to learn how to play guitar, listening to that album. And suddenly he's on stage with you, that's a long journey to get there, and you can't think of it. You can't think, oh, here's the guy, who's on that first album I bought. You got to treat him like another musician, like a friend, like a peer, and that's how he wants to be treated, So you gotta really compartmentalize and put that hero stuff away, and just treat him like another guy, because that's what he would want,
So it's never it's never happened to you. It's never where you've been just playing and been like, this is unbelievable. My dreams have come true. I've arrived in a place. But I understand what you're saying. If it's never happened, it's never happened.
I think a little bit of that might have happened when Paul first joined us with the E Street Band at Hyde Park. He came on stage and we and the geniuses. We went 5 minutes over the curfew and they pulled the plug on us in Hyde Park in London. But we managed to get one song done with Paul McCartney on stage. That was a moment because, he's there singing with Bruce, so I was kind of more observing, and that might have been one of those moments where I just said, wow, this is so great to have him on stage. But by the time he came on my stage on the Soulfire tour, at that point I really had to reduce him to mortal, to a mere mortal, and just think of him as just another friend coming on stage, because I wouldn't have been able to perform with him if not. But the very first time, I had a little bit of that. You can't help it. I mean, it's amazing that these guys are still around.
Stevie, you are not a great guitarist. And so I'm wondering, I'm so excited to ask you this question as a great guitarist. Who are your top 5 guitarists of all time?
Oh, can we
Stevie?
do it backwards, forwards? Can we rank them from 5 to 1 with Stevie Van Zandt? This would be an excellent thing. And we understand it's totally subjective, and this is just hijinks nonsense, but let's pin you down as somebody who really loves the craft, really loves music. Let's give the controversial opinion of the 5th best guitarist of all time, according to Stevie, and let's do it 5 to 1. We'll get you at the height of entertainment. We will get you the appropriate fanfare to give this list the weight that it deserves. Are you ready, Stevie?
Well, we have to do a little. A little bit of a disclaimer, a little bit of a narrowing down, because there's all different kinds of guitar players and different and influences, from the early rockabilly guys, the early blues guys, but we can do the main lead guitar players of the 60s. Let's keep it to that.
Good.
The ones that were, making history, taking the old rockabilly guys and taking the old blues guys and turning that into that new rock era of the 60s.
This is very exciting, Stevie. This is very exciting.
He's being nice to bass guitarists, Dan.
He's agreeing to help us out here, and this contrivance, again, helped free Mandela. He's got better things to do with his time than top 5 guitarists of all time. But number 5, Stevie.
All right, let's do it this way. Let's do number 5. I'm going to do in order, in backwards order, huh?
It's so unfair.
Okay.
It's totally unfair.
Like tricky. I'm gonna go with Mike Bloomfield, number 5, who was the one.
And there it is, the height of entertainment.
You like that?
He was the guitar player with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and was very influential to us as a guitar player. Number 4 will be Jimmy Page, who was the third of the 3 guitar players I'm going to name from the Yardbirds. He was the last guitar player of the Yardbirds, and would soon leave them and form Led Zeppelin. But he had been a session guy for many years before. And was actually asked to be in the Yardbirds early on, and he recommended his friend Jeff Beck, who I'm about to name soon. So Jimmy Page was extremely important and an incredible producer, also very underrated as a producer. I mean, that first Led Zeppelin album alone, every time you hear it, it gets better. I mean, it's unbelievable. They did it in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and it's just incredible, absolutely incredible. The third guitar player number 3, was probably the most important of all of them, which was Eric Clapton. He really led the way. He led the way of transforming the guitar from the blues guys. Most of the black blues guys of the 50s and early 60s, and he basically started to change the entire style of modern guitar playing. I mean, there's nobody that plays guitar that hasn't been influenced by Eric Clapton, whether they know it or not. He's the one who made that big move, Number 2 is my favorite guitar player, who was Jeff Beck. He was the guy who followed Eric Clapton into the Yardbirds, and of course would change the whole hard rock world with his first 2 albums, which are 2 of the greatest albums ever made, Truth and Beck-Ola. He introduced Rod Stewart to us, who was his singer, and absolutely incredible albums. And to this day, Jeff Beck still blows your mind. If you go see him live, he just keeps getting better. I mean, everybody's in awe of him. Last time I saw him, I was standing next to Jimmy Page. Eric Clapton talks about him in all of the documentaries. Jeff Beck continues to blow minds to this day. And number 1 is easy, frankly. That's Jimi Hendrix. He's what happened to the orchestra?
We gave it to you. You just didn't hear it. Now you expect it. It was like tickling him each time. Congrats. You fill out stadiums with entertainment and pyrotechnics across the decades. And look, he's delighted by his shitty fanfare.
It's one of those things you don't know you need it until you don't have it.
He really look at him. You were at the
I got used to it. You brought out the producer in me. Anyway, Jimi Hendrix was just the most amazing guy. I saw him like 4 times, and you just could not believe what you were seeing with him. He blew everybody's mind, including Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Mike Bloomfield, and everybody else. He really, he just was from another planet. I mean, literally, he just, you know, one minute he's in these R&B bands, you know, and you know, he was an okay kind of backup guitar player for the R&B bands. He was with Little Richard. He was with Isley Brothers, and you know, nothing spectacular. Suddenly goes to England, and like a year later, he just completely reinvents the guitar and really defines the psychedelic era, to be honest. I mean, you know, there's psychedelic and then there's psychedelic, but that was his thing, man. His thing was he blossomed in that psychedelic era. He just had that imagination for the, you know, for the otherworldly type of lyrics, you know, and the guitar, you know, talent to just take you to a, you know, completely transport you literally to another galaxy, you know. So you know, I can't imagine him in any other era, really. That you know, that 1967, 1968 period when the psychedelic stuff really took off and, you know, completely dominated the scene, you know. So that's 5, you know, right there.
I would love to ask you questions for hours because you're a great curator. You care about it so much, music, for music history, and you've lived so much of it. You can get his book, Unrequited Infatuations, a memoir, and he chronicles a great deal of his story. But he's got so much fluency in the history of music, in the genres, and he was doing stuff. It must be fascinating to you to see what's happening in this country right now as someone who was working well ahead of its time with causes like South Africa and Mandela. I don't even know what happened. You cover some of it in the book, but what it is that reached you so deeply at a time that people were not caring about this the way that you were caring about it.
Yeah, it was just a matter of going through your whole life with the tunnel vision of trying to make it in rock and roll, like we were talking about before. And it was impossible, you know, really. I mean, it was really, you know, especially from being from New Jersey, you know. I mean, you know, there's been a couple of people from New Jersey that had made it, obviously Frank Sinatra and Four Seasons, but it just wasn't, it wasn't likely that you were going to be discovered there, you know. And suddenly on that 5th album, we were successful, and we had our first hit single, "Hungry Heart," and we're selling out arenas, and bam, we had made it, and that tunnel vision that I had my whole life started to fade away. It's like, okay, we made it to this mountaintop, and I wonder what I've been missing for the last 20 years, you know, because I didn't pay attention at school, you know, I didn't care about anything, nothing except rock and roll, you know. And we're in Germany touring for the first time, really. And a kid came up to me and said, "Why are you putting missiles in my country?" I was like, I just brushed him off. I'm like, "What the hell are you talking about, kid? I'm here to, look at my guitar case. There's no missiles, okay? It's a guitar." But it stayed with me for weeks. I couldn't let it go, and I'm like, why is this bothering me so much? And slowly I came to the realization that when you leave this country, you're not a guitar player, you're not a Republican, you're not a Democrat, you are an American. And that, I'm embarrassed to say, never occurred to me before. Here I am at the age of 30, not realizing I'm an American. Why would you? I mean, you're here, you're in New Jersey, whatever, but suddenly in Germany and in France and in England, you are an American. And I thought, man, maybe I am putting missiles in this country. I wonder what else I'm doing, if we are in fact a democracy, we're supposed to be responsible for our government's actions. I have since found out that we're not really a democracy, but we're working on it. And anyway, I started studying what we've been doing, I started studying for the first time in my life, reading books for the first time in my life, reading about our foreign policy since World War II. And it was shocking, to find out that we're not the heroes of democracy everywhere. We're not always on the right side of the war. We're not always, we had a lot of bad guys on our payroll, and I had grown up in my father was an ex-Marine, Goldwater Republican. I mean, very, very conservative, so I'd grown up with that sense of patriotism, and this didn't feel right to me. This didn't feel like America was doing the right thing in some cases. And so I decided to write about it and left the band to do it, left the E Street Band to do it, to dedicate my time and my life to seeking out this information about what's going on and turning it into songs, becoming like an artist, journalist kind of a guy. And politics became my thing there for 10 years, for the entire 80s,
And you helped with the freeing because of Mandela.
Can't say it enough.
I'm going to let you go because you've got to go, and I would love to talk to you again at some time. So I just want people to understand, though, this man has lived a big life, and he's made some interesting choices and fascinating choices along the path toward becoming an artist. Before you get out of here, though, percentage of times that you get Sopranos versus Springsteen. Like, if you had to break it up, what people know you from, because it was such a pop culture phenomenon, and I much of those worlds intersect, but at one point you just decided to try acting with David Chase when you weren't an actor of any kind.
Yeah, it was funny to watch it because eventually those two audiences did end up kind of merging. But at first they weren't. The Sopranos audience was actually a younger audience than the East Street Band audience. And the reunion happened just as the first season of Sopranos came out. I didn't think I was going to ever, go back into the music business again. I thought, here's my new career is going to be acting, and we had filmed the entire Sopranos first season, and then Bruce decided to put the band back together. So we're touring at exactly the same time as that first season comes out. It must have been, I don't know, 99 maybe, somewhere in there. And and so Bruce, fooling around would introduce me as, Silvio from The Sopranos, and at first, it was a little smattering, you get a little applause, but as the tour continued and The Sopranos, got bigger and bigger, by the end of that tour, when he mentioned Stevie from The Sopranos, it was a huge roar. So you could see the audience kind of growing, and discovering Sopranos as we went. And, eventually, of course, the two audiences really did merge because Sopranos became really, really big. But we couldn't have known that. You don't know it when you're doing it, really. You're hoping for the best, but it was a crazy, crazy pilot. You go back and look at that first show, and it's not obviously, there's nothing obvious about it. I mean, mob guy has ducks flying to his pool, and when they fly away, he has a kind of a nervous breakdown. Is that the makings of a hit show? I don't know. And David Chase was very uncompromising. He did not want to. He had been in TV a long time, so this was going to be his last TV show. He wanted to get into the movie business, which he is now. Which got the new the new Sopranos prequel coming out like in a couple of weeks. But this is going to be his last show, so he didn't care about. He broke every rule. He didn't care anymore. I'm breaking every rule. It's going to be too many characters, too many subplots. I'm not going to do anything remotely seductive, like Hollywood does. It's not going to be pretty lighting. It's not going to be clever camera moves. The camera doesn't move. The lighting is practically cinema verite. It's probably, it's one step away from being a documentary. No real stars. Lorraine, people knew Lorraine a little bit from Goodfellas. You know, and you know, so it was very, very strange thing to suddenly have it within 2 weeks. I swear to God. Now, but at that point, I had been, you know, successful rock star for 25 years, you know, and within 2 weeks of walking down the street, everybody who came up to me was Sopranos. Sopranos, you know, and I was surprised because, you know, I look pretty different in that show. I mean, I'm not exactly, you know, immediately recognizable, you know, and so it shows you the power of TV. But, you know, it's incredibly strong medium. But, you know, as far as life in general, it depends what's happening at the time. You know, if you're touring with the E Street Band, people are going to be, you know, talking about that when they stop you on the street. The Sopranos made a whole comeback during the quarantine. Lilyhammer too. People started rediscovering these two shows, and so I get, you know, I see a lot of it, you know, in the Twitterverse, you know, in the, you know, in the tweets, you know, you can tell what people are watching. So it depends on what's going on at the time. You know, some fans are, you know, more responsive to one and some the other, but almost the same audience at this point.
He nailed it. Give him his fanfare to get him out of here. There it is. He nailed the entire interview. Unrequited Infatuations is the name of the book. He's had a fascinating life and journey, and he chronicles it well. Stugotz, give it to him.
Stevie, listen, that first top five went so well. I want to try another top five, a quicker top five. Top five assholes not named in your book.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Come on.
Name one of them.
One.
Shout his name or her name.
You're gonna have to wait for volume 2. I'm not
It was Zappa. It was Frank Zappa. Thank you, Stevie. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Stevie.